Welcome to another episode of V for Veganism. We are here with Councilman Fernando Cabrera. He represents the 14th district in the Bronx. Councilman, thank you so very much for taking time out of your, I know, very busy schedule to meet with us and talk with us. Before we get into everything that you are working on right now, I want to talk about your road to veganism, how you discovered it, what inspired you to make the change, because I'm assuming you were not born vegan.
No, absolutely not.
Okay. And are you from the Bronx originally?
So I was born in the Bronx, raised in Puerto Rico. When I was 14, moved to California, and then lived in Virginia for a couple of years and came back to New York when I was 25.
Okay.
So I had a journey there that landed me back to New York City, which I love.
Yeah. So you're Puerto Rican. How does your family kind of how do they feel about you being vegan?
Well, it's interesting. Actually, I'm half Puerto Rican, half Dominican. If you look at traditionally our food and our culture, we have surrounded a lot around meats. You know, pork chops, and chicken, and then on top of that is fry. So, it makes it even more egregious to where it got me to, because I had an experience that got me to where I am today, and it happened prior to 2015 October. My wife, she loves to eat vegetables and fruits and so forth. I was the total opposite. I just went for the meats, and again, this is the way I was raised. And then also I had a lot of food addictions, though I was kind of slim. I was only 185 pounds, and sometimes we think because we're somewhat skinny that we're healthy. But in 2015, I remember it was a Thursday evening, I started to get symptoms of losing my breath, chest pains. Then by that Friday evening, I end up in an emergency room. I happened to be in Virginia that day. I was in a speaking engagement. And I have to tell you, I was scared. You ever watch movies where people walking very slow and they know they're gonna die? And I used to say, that looks so fake. I want to tell you, that is very real. And I remember walking very slowly and saying, I hope nothing happens right now. But ironically, when I went in, they told me after they did x-rays and everything that I was okay. They sent me back home and they told me, hey, when you get back to New York. I got back to New York, I couldn't even climb the stairs. I had my luggages, my wife literally, because we didn't have elevators at that time in that building, had to carry the luggages because by the time I got to the top, my heart was beeping so hard that it took literally 5 minutes for my heart to come down. And a doctor friend of mine, who happens to be also a pastor, she called me and she said, hey, are you okay? I've been thinking about you. Hey, by the way, she goes, well, I want you to go to the hospital right now. And that was 10:30 at night. They kept me until Wednesday. I want to tell you, Kristen, they did echogram, they went through x-rays, CAT scan, MRIs. They did it all, and they couldn't find anything. They thought at one point that, hey, you're having a psychiatric issue here. And I'm like, look, my doctorate is in counseling. I'm a mental health licensed counselor. So I know the difference between the two. I'm telling you there's something wrong. And then they did the angiogram. So when they went in, and you're awake when this happens, and they have a television monitor and the doctor's to my right. The other doctor thought, there's nothing wrong with this guy. I never smoked in my life. And because I was asthmatic when I was young, I don't even know what beer tastes like. I mean, live one of those lives when it comes to, things that people would normally say, hey, you gotta watch for this. I didn't have to, so I asked, doctor, you ever had anybody like me? And he says, no, I read about people like you. I told him, I'm gonna be your first one. Then when they went in, I felt this huge pain, right where the heart is at. And I turned to the doctor and said, doctor, is everything okay? I'm saying this with a lot of pain. He goes, we're working on you. And that's when I knew I'm in big trouble.
Yeah.
And then he ended up putting 2 stents. It turned out to be that I had the widowmaker artery, which is the longest artery in the heart. I had a spot where it was 99% blocked. And then another spot, 90%.
Wow.
And I remember asking him, hey, I have about 24 hours to live. He goes, you didn't even have that. And he said, because you didn't even have contingency arteries. As you get older, I'm 54 now. At that time was 50 years old, 51. I didn't have those contingency arteries. You have to get a bit older for those to develop.
Yeah.
I was a recipe for death, and that was a wake-up call. And I have to tell you, I was not mad at God. I was not mad at my wife. I was not mad at my friends. I was not mad at the people who ever cooked. I was upset at myself because I realized that, I was the byproduct. My health was the byproduct of what I had been eating. So, Kirsten, I had to make some changes.
Yeah.
And those changes started with getting rid of all red meats. And I back then, not anymore, I love a good steak, a T-bone steak. I will go to a cuchifrito, which is like Spanish fried food, and started eating that stuff. And I had to get rid of all of that. So it was a change, it was a drastic change. But I said this to myself, Fernando, if you don't change, you're gonna die. You're not gonna last.
Yeah.
So then, ironically, a couple of years went by, actually not even a couple of years, about a year and change, my blood pressure started to increase. And I said, what I'm doing is not enough. Because I was, still eating chicken and turkey. And so I became a pescatarian for 1 week. Then I said, come on, Fernando, be real.
Yeah.
Be real. You gotta, I think that's one of the hardest things, being real to yourself.
Yep.
And looking yourself at the mirror and look at reality and say, hey, you have a big issue here. And the issue was that I always tell people, show me your refrigerator and I'll tell you how healthy you are. And I remember one day I opened the refrigerator and I said, because I know this, if it's in my refrigerator, I'm gonna eat it.
Yeah.
And so I asked myself, is my refrigerator, I use a metaphor, is my refrigerator healthy? Do I have a healthy refrigerator?
I like that.
And and I had a come to a realization that it was not. I loved cheese back then, so I made a change. And one of the things that helped me, as somebody who's considering changing to becoming a vegan, is that you have to have a support system. You have to have people that could guide you and give you support. And when you get tempted to eat the wrong kind of food, because there's appetites that you have accustomed your body to eating, to use certain kind of food to satisfy those appetites. So I needed friends who have been there. And I had a good friend, his name is Eli Sotomayor. He's the best sound engineer in all of the East Coast. And he actually had a heart attack. And he actually had told me 2 months before my incident that I needed to change my eating lifestyle.
Wow.
And so I remember him, I remember another friend of mine, I called them both, and they started to coach me as to what I needed to do. I went online, I found Dr. Joel Furman, and so I was able to just consume all that information. But I always say information without application leads to frustration. And so you have to apply. So I had to apply. And actually I had an opportunity to meet with Dr. Joel Furman.
Oh, great.
Yeah,
That's
for
awesome.
3.5 hours. He's amazing. Wow. And I want to tell you something. I want to tell those who are watching. He's 61 and he has a 6-pack. He has a 6-pack. I
Amazing.
said, you're putting me to shame. Come on. And he practices. You know, there's people that try to sell you something or an idea, but they don't practice what they preach. He actually is living it, and he's so energetic. And when I went through the shift, let me tell you what happened. Within 6 weeks, my blood pressure had gone to 134. It went down to, in 6 weeks, to 110/70. Wow. My doctors were shocked. My HDL went up. It was as low as 26. And now the following time that I went, it went up to 38. 40 is when you start feeling pretty safe.
Okay.
And so when I went to the first time I went to the doctor, I told him what I was going to do. I said, nothing's going to change, just taking some medication. I didn't want medication. You know, there's secondary effects to medication, and I seen what other people go through. I said, you know, my body was not designed to live on the medication. If I could do something about it, mind you, there's people that have condition and maybe they need it for the transitional period, but I knew that our body was so well designed that it could repair itself. Mm-hmm. And so when I went back to the doctor, she was shocked. She was like, wow. And when I went to my cardiologist, he was also shocked. And then I asked him this question: have you ever had a client that was vegan? Now he's 60-something years old. He's been in the medical practice for decades. He thought about it. He didn't give me a quick answer. He thought about it. He says, you know, I had never had one, but I know it's hard to make that shift. Mm-hmm. And so I'm a living proof. Yeah. I'm a living proof that you could live a very active life. I'm a council member and a pastor of a church, the senior pastor, and I preach almost every Sunday. And I still run the church, but I still had the energy level. I said, I have a higher energy level. I don't get sleep in the afternoon like I used to, trying to digest all these heavy foods. Yeah. And so I'm happy. I mean, I'm just so happy that I was able to get to this place in my life.
So you right now, are you the only vegan council member, or there are some I think that are close?
That's a good question. So actually, I was the very first one.
Okay.
But we have another one.
Oh,
Months later, Councilmember Helen Rosenthal, she became vegan.
Amazing.
And Justin Brenner, he's vegetarian.
Okay, he's vegetarian.
So he's almost there.
He's there, yeah.
We'll get onto the promised land. We'll get onto the promised land. But so we are coordinating in certain bills, certain resolutions here that we want to pass in the city council, because food affects how you think, how you function, how you even relate to people. Yeah. And to be honest with you, in New York City, we're behind. There are other municipalities that are way ahead of us. Mm-hmm. And I think that we could do better. I think that we need to do better. Mm-hmm. We have a mandate to do better.
So the Brooklyn Borough President, Eric Adams, he put forth, is he the one who put forth this bill to get rid of processed foods in New York public schools?
Yes, well, he gave me a call, and at his request, I introduced a resolution calling upon the state of New York. We call it ban the bologna. And so we want to get rid of all the processed food. And for the public at large, perhaps you don't know, you may not know, is that especially last year there was a research that came out that those who eat 2 or 3 times a week processed food, and I was one of those. I thought, hey man, this is chicken, everybody says chicken is good for you, turkey is good for you, that they increase their chances of death by 50%. Wow. There's very few things in life that you could do to increase your chances of death. And it puts them in the same category, some of these chemicals in there, as arsenic. And so nobody in the right mind would give anything to children, especially children during the most important developmental years of their life, physical developmental and cognitive, and all of the developmental variables that young people have to experience. in their lives, nobody in their right mind will give them something that will be intentionally will be given something that will not be good for them, and it's going to affect them educationally too, because it's going to affect their cognitive processes that they so need in order to do in school. Look, we have one school in New York City that has turned 100% vegetarian. So we're calling upon the state legislators, and we've been so pleasantly amazed how many council members have postulated themselves to be so positive towards this wrestle, because we have a great council right now, and they really do care about children. So our goal is to have a hearing on September alongside with Meatless Monday, wrestle by Councilmember Henry Rosenthal. And we are looking into introduce a series of other, not introduce yet, they're in the LS process right now, which is they're writing into law, and then I'll be introducing some other bills that are animal right friendly, and also that are will help us to be more conscientious of the way that we eat and the way we treat our public. How we treat animals says a lot about society. It's about how we treat creation. And as you know, I'm a pastor of a church, and I don't want to sound too religious here, because really I'm not into religion. I'm really into relationships. Relationships with people, relationships with animals. And I think this is a spiritual aspect that we need to pay attention to.
Absolutely.
You know, it's an interesting place in the Bible that caught my attention, which is the end of Joel. Is said, not Joel, Jonah. Everybody knows the story about the man who got swallowed by a whale. At the end, he says, "Don't you care about those who are children?" I'm giving a translation. And then he says, he closes the book, he says, "and animals." He says, "I'm not going to do anything that would hurt this city, not only because of the children, but he mentions animals." And so if anybody who sees themselves as spiritual, I think this should be in that makeup, there should be this focus on taking care of that part of creation.
You know, there are a lot of people that use their faith and the Bible, which I don't know that they've necessarily even read the Bible, but they use it as sort of this excuse to continue, doing what they do, whether it be eating meat or using animals for this, that, and the other thing, and this argument that that animals were created for us. In terms of because you lead your congregation, do you touch on these points? Do you have arguments with people that,
It's very interesting. I'm so glad you brought this up. So the first thing I would say from a biblical point of view, if you look at creation, which is what we aspire to have a society like that, they were vegan.
Right.
So if that's the way Adam and Eve live, it makes sense for us to aspire. And since we, in the Christian tradition, we say now we are new creation. Well, we are new creation that should match what we saw with Adam and Eve. In terms of, I will tell you this, one of the research points that I found that was very interesting, it's going to shock you. It was a national study. 76% of pastors are overweight. 76% of congregants are overweight. Not 74, not 77. And what that tells me is people tend to follow whatever the leader tends to do. This is why I think we should have a campaign in dealing with leadership in houses of faith, regardless of what religion, to educate pastors. From my church, you could ask anybody in my church. They know I'm vegan. They know I have preached about it. I mean, I'm not saying just one point out of entire. I had taken an entire message to deal with this issue, because here's what it is. If you're not feeling well, you're not going to feel like praying. You're not going to feel like reading the Bible. You're not going to feel very loving. You're not going to feel, your body, the second thing, your body affects everything else. The second thing is that how we treat animals, again, is a lot about our faith.
Yeah.
And so I think at the heart of this, and I can tell you from somebody who went through it, is food addictions. We are addicted to certain types of food. So matter of fact, former commissioners of the Food and Drug Administration had said that one of the requirements, and many of the people who put out certain foods, especially those who deal with meat, is that they make the food in a way that so you can get addicted to it.
Yeah.
And so you're just not eating cold cuts. They make the cold cuts so you get addicted to eating it again and again and again, because they want you to be a repeat customer. And we in the faith community, we need to address this. I know it's not popular, but I tell you, this is the fight. I remember I went to visit somebody. They were in the hospital. They thought they were having heart problems. Sitting there, this is shocking. This is gonna shock you. And I'm sharing them my experience, and I say, hey, there is another way. And here they have all kinds of things hooked up to them, and they tell me, no way, I'd rather die. I'm like, which tells me that part of the problem that we have here is a form of addiction that, we'll talk about any other addiction, but the holy grail is that it's certain types of food. But again, persistence overcomes resistance, and we need to re-educate the people in the houses of faith, regardless of whatever religion, and start having that level of discussion, So I know there are groups that will go to houses of worship, and those who are watching, if you're interested in that, we could connect with people who were educated. I had, even in my own office, I have had people come and speak to my staff, because food affects their performance.
Absolutely.
And so, it's been an educational process. I have another staff who's vegan. She's been vegan for many, many years.
Oh,
and
great.
So, we got solidarity there.
Yeah.
It
takes that sometimes,
It does.
like there are people that can, walk this totally unbeaten path and march to the beat of their own drummer, and they're vegan and they're like, I don't care what the rest of you are doing. But for most people, it takes a community, and it takes people that are like-minded to keep them, on track. And so, yeah, that's great that you have other people in the office.
I think that's so important for the public at large to get connected to your Facebook, to get connected to the information you're putting out, because this is, you have to renew your mind, and you have to change the way you're thinking.
Yeah.
Your thinking will determine your behavior. I always tell people, you do what you believe. So you show me what you're doing, so if you want to change the way what you do, you got to change what you believe about animals. You got to change the way you believe about your body. You have to change the way you believe about how you should love yourself enough to take care of your body. So, and to take care of animals at the same time. So we have it all. When I met Steve and John Phillip in 2009, I was a newbie on these issues, and when they sat down with me about all the animal rights issues, to be honest with you, I was oblivious about it, and I remember saying to myself, "Wow, I'm surprised that this is still going on."
Yeah.
In terms of the horse carriage in specific, I remember driving, when I drive my hands and I see the horses driving through the street, they're not in their natural habitat and natural context. And dangerous situation, dangerous for the animals, potentially dangerous to others around them. So we need to do something, and we're going to do something.
I know. I wanted to ask you, because to us as activists, sometimes it feels like there's no hope almost. When the intro didn't even come to a vote the last time, and we're like still here. And I know which union you speak of, yes. And the power that they have. And it's just like, are we ever going to save them? Are we ever going to stop this? And so, if you tell me there's hope, then I will believe there's hope.
This is what I learned. Persistence overcomes resistance. Okay. And we have to stay on the fight. Look at some of the most important issues that we have ever faced about rights in our society. We didn't make the turn and created that turnaround moment overnight. It takes years, yeah. Because some of this is part of our culture, and we need to change how we think about things. And changing the mind of the public sometimes takes time. We got to get the message out. Let me tell you, the last time, and for those who don't know, we were super close. We were literally less than 16 hours away. I was shocked when it got shut down because I was getting ready to vote, I was getting ready to rejoice, but we were that close. I mean, this is not like, it was miles and miles away. We were literally inches away from getting it passed. I think the new bill that is going to be before us is going to be a bill that it would expose people who really don't care about animals, because now you're removing all the other arguments away. And so I think it's a great compromise. It's a step forward in the right direction. And I believe that it is going to happen. Everyone who's watching right now, call your council member.
Call your council member.
And even if you're not from New York, pick somebody.
Call Ben.
Call them. Yeah, call Ben and just go down the list of those who have not signed up. But this is what I will tell you. I have had private conversations where people who were in the fence, now they're in. Many of them. And there's going to be more with us than those who are not with us. So I think that this is the time, this is the moment, and we are the people to get this done. So it's going to happen. You'll see. We'll rejoice. I'd love to come back and say, we did it. We did it. It happened.
Well, thank you again so much for meeting with us. We really appreciate you taking your time. We don't want to take up any more of your time, but guys, please get in touch with Councilman Cabrera. He has a wealth of knowledge and he's doing amazing things for the city, amazing things for veganism. Also remember to subscribe below. And give us what was the thing you said before in Spanish that I didn't understand what you were saying?
You want me to say give a pitch in Spanish?
I want you to give that pitch, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to sound like a radio announcer. Hermanos y amigos, quiero que ustedes visiten aquí, conquisten su Facebook. Ella tiene un Facebook fabuloso y también con V de Veganism. Y usted puede llegar a ese punto. Hermanos y amigos, aquí con su concejal Fernando Cabrera.
Sí.